everyone and welcome back to Velvet Moments. There are some relationships in BTS that feel incredibly special to fans. Not because they are always defined by dramatic words or grand confessions, but because they are built through years of memories, trust, laughter, support, and countless little moments. One of the relationships that continues to capture ARMY's attention is the close bond between Jimin and Jungkook. They have known each other since their trainee days. They grew up together, experienced the difficult years of becoming BTS, stood beside each other through exhausting schedules, and eventually watched their group become one of the biggest names in the world. Because of this long history, every time Jungkook shows particular affection or concern toward Jimin, fans naturally become curious. Could Jimin really have a uniquely special place in Jungkook's heart? Of course, there has been no official confirmation that Jungkook and Jimin are romantically involved. Their relationship should not be presented as something confirmed when neither of them has publicly defined it that way. But their friendship is undeniably meaningful. And that is what makes their story so fascinating. #I like you too, Jimin. One old interaction between them is still remembered by many fans. Jimin once playfully expressed how much he liked Jungkook, even joking about being a Jungkook lover. Jungkook responded by saying that wasn't true and that he liked Jimin too. It was a simple exchange. There was no dramatic confession. No elaborate speech. Just a short response between two people who had already spent years together. But sometimes the simplest words can become the most memorable. I like you too. For fans, the moment became another example of the comfortable way Jimin and Jungkook communicate with each other. It does not prove romantic love. But it does show affection, familiarity, and the kind of closeness that comes from knowing someone for a very long time. Jimin once talked about loving one person for life. There is another old interview that fans sometimes bring up when discussing Jimin's thoughts about love. When BTS members were asked about their ideal love story, Jimin described the idea of loving only one person throughout his life. That statement was not a confession about any particular individual. Jimin did not name anyone. However, because fans have watched his relationship with Jungkook develop over many years, some naturally find the statement interesting when viewed alongside their long friendship. Jungkook also talked about love in the same period, explaining that if he eventually fell in love with someone he would want to spend a lot of time with that person. Again, these comments were general reflections about love. They should not be interpreted as proof that either member was talking about the other. But they offer an interesting glimpse into how the two young artists viewed relationships at that stage of their lives. #A bond built over many years. Jimin and Jungkook's closeness did not suddenly appear after BTS became famous. Their story began much earlier. Jungkook joined the company as the youngest member, while Jimin became one of the older members who experienced the early years alongside him. They trained together. They practiced together. They lived together. They struggled together. And eventually, they stood together on stages in front of millions of people around the world. That kind of shared history creates a special connection. It is built through ordinary moments that outsiders may never see. Waking up in the same environment. Practicing late at night. Eating together. Talking about worries. Laughing over silly things. Encouraging each other after difficult performances. Those moments may never become headlines, but they can become the foundation of a lifelong friendship. You are me, I am you. One phrase frequently associated with Jimin and Jungkook is, you are me, I am you. For fans, the phrase has become symbolic of how similar and connected the two can sometimes appear. They have shared interests. They understand each other's personalities. They can tease one another without making things uncomfortable. And sometimes they seem to know what the other person is thinking without needing a long explanation. This kind of connection does not necessarily need to be romantic. Friendship can be incredibly deep too. Sometimes the person who understands you best is simply the person who has been beside you for the longest time. Their journey together. One of the most interesting things about Jimin and Jungkook is how much of their lives they have experienced together. They were young when BTS began. Neither of them could have known how far their journey would eventually take them. From small practice rooms to enormous stadiums. From trainee evaluations to global awards. From ordinary days together to traveling around the world. They witnessed each other's growth. Jungkook watched Jimin become more confident. Jimin watched Jungkook grow from the youngest member into a world-famous performer. They changed physically, emotionally, and professionally. Yet their friendship remained part of the story. That is why their interactions can feel nostalgic to longtime fans. When fans watch old BTS content, they are not simply seeing two members joking around. They are seeing two people who grew up together. Hashtag Jungkook's quiet way of showing care. Jungkook has often been known for expressing himself through actions rather than lengthy emotional speeches. Sometimes affection can be found in very small gestures. A glance. A smile. A joke. Checking whether someone is okay. Standing nearby. Helping when something becomes difficult. These moments can be easy to overlook. But when people have known each other for years, small gestures can communicate a lot. That is one reason fans pay such close attention to Jimin and Jungkook's interactions. Not because every moment needs to be interpreted romantically, but because their comfort with each other is obvious. They know each other's habits. They understand each other's humor. And they have shared too many experiences to simply be strangers passing through the same group. Hashtag is Jimin really Jungkook's one and only? This is where the line between fact and fan interpretation becomes important. There is no confirmed public statement from Jungkook saying that Jimin is his one and only romantic love. So it would be unfair to present that claim as established fact. But there is another interpretation that can be meaningful. Jimin may be one of the people who has played an extremely important role in Jungkook's life. They have shared an extraordinary amount of time together. They experienced the same challenges. They celebrated the same victories. They watched each other mature. And they became part of the same incredible journey. That kind of bond is difficult to replace. Hashtag love does not always mean possession. When fans talk about love, it is easy to immediately think about romance. But love can have many forms. There is romantic love. There is family love. There is friendship. There is loyalty. There is the love between people who have struggled together and continue to support each other. Jimin and Jungkook do not need a romantic label for their bond to be meaningful. Their friendship can stand on its own. Perhaps that is the most beautiful way to appreciate them. Rather than asking who belongs to whom, fans can simply appreciate the fact that these two people have been there for each other through so many chapters of their lives. Hashtag a connection that fans cannot easily forget. Years have passed since BTS first debuted. The members have grown older. Their careers have expanded. Their individual identities have become stronger. Their schedules have changed. But when Jimin and Jungkook appear together, fans often notice the same sense of familiarity. A familiar smile. A familiar joke. A familiar glance. A moment of comfortable silence. None of these things prove a romantic relationship. But they can remind fans of how long these two have known each other. And perhaps that is why the Jimin and Jungkook friendship remains so beloved. It is not simply about one viral moment. It is about years of history. Hashtag so, did Jungkook really say Jimin was his only love? The honest answer is that there is no official confirmation that Jungkook has declared Jimin his one and only romantic love. That part remains a fan interpretation. But there is something that cannot easily be disputed. Jimin has been an important person in Jungkook's life for a very long time. They grew together. They worked together. They struggled together. They celebrated together. And they continue to share memories as members of BTS. Maybe the most meaningful part of their story is not whether fans can give their relationship a romantic label. Maybe it is simply the fact that two people met at a young age and ended up becoming an important part of each other's lives. And that is already something beautiful. Hashtag the answer only they know. Whenever fans see Jungkook looking at Jimin with a smile, or Jimin teasing Jungkook and making him laugh, the same question often returns. Is there something deeper behind that look? Only Jimin and Jungkook know exactly what they feel. Fans can interpret moments, celebrate memories, and enjoy their chemistry, but their private feelings ultimately belong to them. What we can see is a friendship shaped by years of shared experiences. A friendship that survived the pressure of fame. A friendship that grew alongside BTS. A friendship filled with laughter, teasing, support, and countless unforgettable memories. And perhaps that is enough. Because sometimes, the most powerful kind of love is not the one that needs to be publicly defined. It is the kind that quietly remains through every chapter. For Jimin and Jungkook, their story is ultimately about two people who grew up together and became an important part of each other's journey. Whether fans see their bond as friendship, brotherhood, or simply a special connection between two people who understand each other deeply, one thing remains undeniable. Jimin and Jungkook have shared a remarkable journey together. And that history is something no one can take away from them. Purple Heart.